Of it. Okay, for today, we'll be covering web servers, databases, scripting languages, and wikis. Lots of different things, and they sort of all go together. So I'll take this a step at a time. Grab your Ubuntu server guide. Make sure that's running. We'll be following through that. We'll be starting with Chapter 11, doing a couple of things in Chapter 11, going on to Chapter 12, databases, and Chapter 13, LAMP applications. So we're going to be covering those three chapters, highlights of those chapters, just certain areas of them. So switching over to web servers. I'm going to put that on the side for right now. I'm going to start up my server. And your desktop. You're going to need your server and your desktop today. Before we start, you probably want to be taking a snapshot, probably calling it pre-web or something like that. And open up my server as well. Pre-web.
So chapter 11. Oh, yeah.
Chapter 11. Pre-chapter 11. For reviewing for this material, I'm a little bit nervous, only because once it failed on me. Go through the exercises, and all of a sudden, just once it didn't work. The other times it worked, so we should be okay. But just letting you know that there's always that potential. I must have mistyped something somewhere. And my client and my server are both up. I'll log into my server. And I could do updates. 97 packages can be updated. 47 are security updates. We're not going to do that right now. Moving back over to our server guide. Chapter 11, web servers. The web server is a software responsible for accepting HTTP requests from clients, which are known as web browsers, and serving them HTTP responses along with optional data contents, which are usually web pages such as HTML documents and linked objects such as images and things. How many of you has anybody taken IIS or web page, anything? How many of you know how to make a web page? Raise your hand. How many of you do not? Okay. We're not going to be teaching web page development today. Well, that many haven't. I thought that you had a class already with that. Okay, we might take a look at that and see of how to develop a simple web page. There's some really good references out there, and we can take a look at that. For right now, we want to get the web server part of it running. So if I scroll down, HTTPD Apache 2 web server. Apache is the most commonly used web server on Linux systems. Web servers are used to serve web pages requested by client computers and so forth. The clients are browsers such as Firefox, Opera, Chromium, and Mozilla. Chromium is the Linux open source side of Chrome, by the way. Users enter the URL to point to the web server, and you're able to get to it. If I go to my client computer, my desktop computer, I click on Firefox, and that's my web browser. I should be able to, if my networking is set up correctly, go to pages like CNN.com or eBay or Yahoo or whatever it's going to be. By the way, did you guys hear about this guy who jumped from, what, 128,000 feet? Going like 900 miles an hour? That'd be pretty cool.
A millimeter off the classroom floor.
Oh, what's that?
It's like a millimeter off the classroom floor.
Is it really? If you talk about the... That's it?
Yeah.
Wow. But that's still really high.
But it's still really high.
Anyway, I'm able to use the web browser. My server, let me get my server's IP address. We're going to have to set the static one of these weeks. My DHCP address for my server is 192.168.230.132. So if I go back to my desktop and I type that in, 192.168.230. My memory. What was it again? 230.132. 230.132. It says it's unable to connect. Either the site's down, not available, can't do the pages. Basically, there's no web server there. So we're going to be installing a web server on that server. And again, Ubuntu server is a full functioning server, just nothing's installed. So anything that you wanted to do, you have to add it separately. And so we'll be adding that. If I look through my documentation, the installation process 1.1, it's sudo apt-get install Apache 2. It's right here. Sudo apt-get install. This is the same we've done for everything else so far, by the way. When we're doing sudo apt-get and we install an application, it's Apache 2. Yes?
We've got Webmin running.
That's okay because it's a different port.
Okay.
Webmin is using port 10,000. This is going to use port 80, which is the standard HTTP one.
Because I pulled up a default web page.
Oh, may have installed the basic one, and you Webmin is just. It doesn't bring up a Webmin though, does it?
No.
Okay.
No, not the login screen. Just
Okay.
It works. This is a default page for your server.
Oh, by doing Webmin. Oh, that's right. Go ahead and try it. See what happens. See if it tells you if it's already installed. Because that was extra material that wasn't in the book. And I always go back to an earlier edition. I always take rid of all that stuff. I don't have any Webmin or any of those other things we've installed.
It wasn't installed. It's installing them.
For you, it's installing now? What does yours say?
Apache 2 is already the newest version.
Okay, so if you ran Webmin, it must have installed Apache automatically, and it didn't do anything else for you though. It just says your page is configured, nothing's there, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay. Go through the process. If it's already there, it's there. Webmin may have installed it, and you may still have it. If you revert to a snapshot, it's just going to install it again. And once I get to this part, it's essentially done. The web server is downloaded, installed, and configured at a basic level. If I switch over to my desktop and I just refresh the screen, it says it works. And if you have Webmin, this is probably what you got. Is this what you got, Daniel?
Yes.
Okay. It works. This is the default web page for this server. The web server software is running, but no content has been added yet. I'll wait for everybody to get caught up to this point. Let's continue along here. That is the basic web server, and it is configured. It's ready for those HTTP requests, and this is what it's serving back. Scrolling through here, the configuration a little bit. There's lots of configuration. We're not going to look at much of this. We will be looking at, scrolling down, scrolling around, basic settings. In here talks about the document root. So the document root directive specifies where Apache 2 should look for the files that make up the site. The default is var www. So that's where our web pages are. So let's take a look at that for a minute. Let's switch back over to our server. And we're going to change, if I do an ls, I'm in the root right now, I do an ls, and actually I'm not. Now I'm in the root, cd / is the root, and I can see that I have a var directory. To change to it, I do cd var, and then if I do an ls, I'll see a www directory as well. I can change directories to www. So that is the default, is var www. This is where the site is. Now, if you're familiar with web pages at all, you have the root document directory, which is where when you type in an address, that's where it's going to look and look for those files. If I do an ls, I have one file. It's called index.html. That is the default, and that is changeable. It's in here somewhere. Include indexes. It talks about it in here somewhere. That the default documents is looking for is index.htm or index.html, and there's a couple other ones as well. If I took a look at this, sudo vim index.html, here's the actual document, and this is where it has, it's called tags, of how you have headers and footers, and you have the actual page or documents, the paragraphs, what the body of it's going to be as well.
What did you type in for that?
What I typed in, sudo vim, so I want to edit this document. It's a regular text document. HTML documents, pages, by the way, are straight text. And it's using all the different tags and codes, though, that make it two different things. So sudo vim index.html. And when I do that, I can see my document up here. So it has HTML body header 1. That's what makes it works really big. And then you have different /p, and then you also have to have a close tag as well. We're going to add another line on here just for the fun of it. I hit A to append to this. I'm going to go to the very last line, and I'm going to put a blank space in there. So I'm going to hit enter right before body, and I'm going to put another line in here. And I'll use the tags that the previous line has put. So I'll use a bracket, P, close bracket, bracket P, close bracket, and then I'm just going to type a name, Paul Benfield. Now I have to do the bracket /P to tell that is the end of that tag. Tags also have an opening tag and a closing tag, and everything between it is what counts. So let's go ahead and save this. If I hit escape and then :W, let's go right to that file. That index file has now been updated. Let me switch over to my server. I'm sorry, my desktop. I'm going to refresh my browser, and now my browser is looking at that file. So that shows that that's the file that I'm working with. Since we were able to see our server with our name on it, our web page with our name on it, we can change the formatting. P is plain text, or no formatting. Let me click in here. If I use click A to append it, since I didn't actually exit, I just exited. I just rewrote the file. I'm going to change those tags from P's to H's, which, if you remember, up on top is a heading. So H1, before and after my last name. It's hard to see because the editor changes the colors of these things. And now I hit escape and then :W to write the file again. Switching back to my desktop, I refresh my screen again, and now my text changes. So that's how you do formatting. If I want to take a look at, this is probably pretty extensive. Here's go to LTC's website. If I right click on here, I can look at the page source. How do I not do that. What am I doing? Come on, view page source. There we go. So this is how a page would be looking at, like in a text document. You have a heading, meta, links, link references, and here's your body. Everything within your body is what really gets printed and shown.
Now, how did you go start?
How you can do this on any web page. Go to a web page you want to take a look at, say ebay.com. If you want to see how this is all laid out, now this is really extensive. A real simple web page would be a lot easier and a lot nicer. But if you right click on the page, it'll say view the page source, which is the HTML code for it. And this is all the HTML. So lots of tags in here. Here's a span tag, an A tag, a div tag, image source, source equals, and then it points to an image. That's how you put images in there. And this is very complicated, obviously. Simpler web pages can be made as well. But this is the web page we're working with right now. In fact, right from here, I could right-click on here and say View Page Source, and I can see the actual HTML code for that web page.
Can we change it right there?
You can change it from here. You could copy it from here and put it in Notepad and put it on your own web server, and that's what some people do, is how they steal other ideas or web pages, or screen scraping. Be able to take a web page and be able to duplicate it. It's a lot more extensive code than simple right now, but you could take this code and put it on your web server. You can't change this. This is just viewing the source. You would not be able to, from a client, be able to change the actual files on a web server by viewing the source. But let's just see, it's like, oh, that's how they did that. And you can center it, and you can put bullets in front of it, and there's lots and lots of tags on there. Let's just try and find a simple one to demonstrate that. And it's a lot more extensive than we really need to get to. So I can close this, and I can see my web pages there. Go back to my server, and I have it the way I want it to do. So now I'm going to just quit. So :Q to quit. Again, my file is index.html is my default. If you want to put a different page there, that's perfectly fine. It just is called index.html. And then every time you access that web server, and that's just a web server, this could be renamed to a name. If you had domain name services running, it gets resolved to 192.168.230.132. It finds that file in that document root directory, whatever that is, and then it displays it. And my document root by default is var.www. I can change directories back to my root and sort of wait there. So that's the web server side of things, and the default location and the default file that we're working with. Scrolling through the web pages chapter 11, you can see there's lots of different things that you can change. I don't want to get into much of those. The next section is dealing with HTTPS configuration. Module mod SSL module adds an important feature to Apache server. It's the ability to encrypt the communication, or using an SSL connection. Thus, when your browser communicates using SSL, the prefix HTTPS is used at the beginning. So if I switch over to my server, my desktop, sorry, and I want to see if I have an HTTPS connection to this, I can do HTTPS:// and then my IP address. So again, I'm using HTTP right now, which is port 80. I want to see if I can use a secure connection, because it's going to encrypt the data between there. Right now, if you had a packet sniffer on my network, you would be able to see all that traffic, the request and the actual web page coming across, all in plain text, and you'd be able to see that it says it works, and it says Paul Benfield on it, and that's fine. If I want that to be encrypted, so you can't see that data as it's traveling across the network, I need HTTPS. I hit enter on there, it says it can't connect to it. That's because I don't have HTTPS module installed on my server. So let's go do that. Switching back over to my server. The command I want to be running on here is in the documentation on page 192, and it's sudo a2en mod SSL. Which module do you want to install? So I type in sudo a2en mod and then SSL. It needs the password since I typed in sudo. And it's pretty quick. That's as fast as it needs to go. Now it says to activate the new configuration, you want to restart the Apache server. There's actually one more step that we want to do first. And page 193, it sort of talks about that. It talks about the certificates and about the default HTTPS configuration file. In order for it to provide HTTPS, a certificate and key are also needed. And we're going to go through that process right now, is that certificate and key. And that's the next command on there. So it's sudo a2en site, not mod, it's a little bit different, default SSL. This is not something you necessarily memorize. This is where you have documentation and you look through. It's like, what are these commands? I would not expect you to memorize these and just know them off the top of your head. How do you enable SSL on an Apache web server and a Linux Ubuntu server? Look it up. It's a simple command, but go ahead and look it up. And now it's enabling the default key and certificate. That's not necessarily secure or the best route, but it's going to get us working. And later on, you can go back and change that key or change that certificate. You can register that certificate to make sure it's authenticated and so on and so forth. Now that we have the certificate SSL installed and the certificate and key generated, now we have to restart our Apache web server so that it picks up all those new configurations. To do that, we type in sudo service, and we can do this with any service, by the way, whether it's DHCP or DNS or printing services or whatever. We say sudo service and what service we want to work with, and this is Apache 2, and then we can restart that service. So sudo service Apache 2 restart. And that should be it. Switching over to my desktop now, I have HTTPS and then my web server's address. I go ahead and refresh. It gives me a connection. It's just not trusted because it's not a known certificate. It's a generic default one. You say, I understand the risks. Under understand the risks, I add the exception. Permanently store this exception is fine, and then I confirm the security exception. I get the exact same page. There's no difference in the content. It's how it gets delivered to you. So before, the plain text was going across every packet, and if you had a packet sniffer, like I said, you could pull all the data right off of here, just in plain text off of a packet sniffer. If you tried that right now, it'd all be encrypted. It'd just be garbage. You could see who it's coming from and who it's going to, but you would not be able to see the content of it. HTTPS does add extra processing on the server side and on the client side, and that's why it's not used all the time, but it's so simple, I'm not sure why it's not used more than what it is. But it's a secure connection. Are we good with that? So we're able to make a basic web server, and we're able to make a secure web server. We're able to modify an HTML file somewhat. Again, I don't want to get real in depth into creating HTML documents today. Unless we have time at the end, maybe we'll come back to it. Any questions? Again, these commands are on page 192 and 193 of your server guide. So if you do miss those or want to put those in your notes, that would be a good idea. And I take you through, just those 3 steps right in a row. Going back to my desktop again, HTTP and HTTPS will both work. One's secure and one's not. I get the same content either way. Okay, back to documentation. It's going to have other sharing rights and permissions. If you have more than one people wanting to write to the same directories at the same time, you can do that. I'm not going to really concentrate on that. PHP. PHP is a general purpose scripting language suited for web development. PHP is used a lot. If there's a programming language or a scripting language that you want to learn, this would probably be one towards the top of your list of ones that you might be looking into. PHP script can be embedded into HTML. This section explains how to install and configure PHP in the Ubuntu system with Apache and MySQL. MySQL is a database we'll be talking about next. Okay, this section assumes you've installed and configured Apache Web Server and MySQL database. We will get to MySQL in just a minute, and you can refer to those processes later on. We're going to make sure I do actually do it that order. PHP first. Yeah. Okay, to install PHP, and we're using version 5 by the way, it's a little bit longer command. Normally we'd do sudo apt-get install PHP 5, and that'd be it. We're including another object as well, so we're installing 2 things, PHP 5 and libapache2 mod PHP 5. So that's sort of what's going to be integrated into Apache. So PHP 5 on itself, and then also the library addition mod to Apache 2. So I'm going to scroll this down a little bit so I can see it. And I just scrolled way too far. Don't know where it went. There we go. Okay, on my server, sudo apt-get install PHP 5 and then libapache2 mod PHP 5. And you do have to spell sudo correctly.
You do?
You do. I thought it had to be like my phone where it auto checks on as you spell.
I like it.
And it comes up with all the wrong words, not the words that you wanted. You hit the backspace, and you type it again, and it says, no, this is the word you want. No, it's not. And then it remembers the wrong word. And
I love it when it's like not even remotely close to the word that you typed in. It's like, where did that word even come from?
And that is the installation of PHP.
That's it?
That is it.
That's pretty easy.
Pretty easy. I'll let you finish that up on yours. We'll walk through this a little bit, a few more steps on the PHP. There's also a PHP command line interface option, so you can run it just command by command. That is installed automatically when you did the full PHP. So the PHP CLI is just a portion of the full version of the PHP. So if I try to install that right now, it'll tell me that's already installed. So if you just want just the command line interface option, then that's all you need. The full PHP is going to include that as well. And then if you want to run it without the Apache module, it shows you to do that as well. And if you want to add MySQL, you can do this as well, and we'll get to that later on. Configuration. Once you install PHP 5, you can run the scripts from your web browser. Well, what's that going to look like? By default, the Apache 2 web server is configured to run PHP 5 scripts. Once you install PHP related packages and enable PHP module, you should restart the Apache server. So we're going to do that in just a minute. But we're going to, well, we can do that now. We'll do that now. Yes. Yeah, there's different ways of changing directories. CD, I can do /var. That's going to get me there. And then I can do CD space double dot, which is the parent directory. That takes me back. Since I'm in the directory that has var, I can just do CD space var. And then if I want to go back, CD space, and then go to the root. If I want to go right to the var www directory, I can go CD var www, and I'm there. I can go CD dot dot, take me up a level. CD space www to take me back down to www, and then CD backslash take me to the root. Knowing where you are in the tree and just going up and down the directories, up a directory, down a directory, jumping right to the directory that you want, jumping right to the directory you want, typing the directory you want. If I go to the root, I go to the root. What's nice about this is I could be in var www, and I can go right to the Etsy directory, CD space Etsy, and now I'm just right there. I don't have to navigate all the way down, all the way up and down the tree. Navigation is going to be really, really important, so just keep practicing that. Make directories, navigate to them, delete the directories, navigate around. Other questions? What we're going to do is to test this is we're going to write a PHP script, a very small, tiny one. And yeah, we're going to create a PHP script. And we're going to put it in the document root directory. So the document root directory is my var www directory. That is configurable. You can change that to some other place, but that is by default where it's located. So I go to CD space var www. And so now I'm in the var www directory. Now I'm going to create a new document, and I'm going to call it phpinfo.php. So I'm going to use Vim for that. Using sudo to make sure I have all the rights that I need. Sudo vim phpinfo.php. And down the bottom it tells me that's a new file. Doesn't contain anything. I hit A to append. Now I can type. Now all the brackets and everything count, so I'm doing the bracket question mark. phpinfo.php. It's actually listed right there. And then it's only 3 lines long. It's a very, very, very simple script, and it does, in fact, just show the PHP information, but it tells you that it's an actual script, it's running, it's executing and doing something. So I do PHP, on the next line down, the command is phpinfo, and this is where parameters would be in. It's a blank, it's empty, so it's just 2 parentheses, and then a semicolon. The semicolon is important. That tells us the end of that line. And then I end up with a question mark and a bracket. So that should be your entire document. Bracket, question mark, PHP, PHP info, closed parentheses, semicolon, and question mark bracket. I did, just to make it, that's formatting. When you're done, hit escape, then colon WQ, that writes it, and it quits out of Vim.
Is there spaces afterwards? It's PHP info and then brackets. Is there spaces in there?
No, no spaces.
Yeah.
To see if this works now, we're going to switch over to our desktop. And on my desktop, up on the top, I'm going to the web browser. And by default, it goes to index.html. I wanted to go to a different file. And I want to go to phpinfo.php. So that's the file that I wanted to look at, the web browser to look at. And you can see that it runs the script by coming up with the PHP info version information. If your document, if it comes up blank or nothing's there at all, it's most likely a typo in your document file. So go back to your server. Make sure you're in the var www directory. First of all, start with ls to make sure that you actually have a php info.php file. Vim php info.php.
So it's.
We're going to keep moving here. And again, I'm just going to touch on the things in a couple of chapters. Hopefully the most important things, obviously being able to create a web server and a secure web server are very important. And you'll be seeing of how PHP will be playing into it later on with scripting. And having scripting actually doing things for us. Continuing with chapter 11, under web servers, we have a Squid, which is a proxy server. If you're familiar with proxy servers, they do the requests for you. The advantage of that is they can do caching and speed things up for you. It can also be used for monitoring or for filtering as well. We're not be working with Squid, proxy server. Go ahead and try it on your own. Definitely test it, try it out, and play with it. Just because of time and what we have to cover this semester, we're just kind of going through just the highlights. Ruby on Rails. This is another programming language really developed to work with databases in the background, the web pages. So between PHP and Ruby on Rails, those would be really good ones to know if you're looking to go that direction. We're going to stick with just PHP today. That's going to give us what we need it to do. But you can see the configuration for Ruby on Rails. Finally, in this section, we have Apache Tomcat. It's a web container that allows you to serve Java servlets or Java server pages. You can install them as classic, unique system-wide instances that would start at boot time. But you can also deploy private instances that run later on. So again, it's all web-based, and it's all based on the web server. And you can work with Tomcat. And continuing on. Chapter 12 is databases. They talk about two in this chapter, MySQL and PostgreSQL. Both of them are sequential query languages, and there's lots of those out there. There's Microsoft SQL, Oracle SQL. It's a very traditional style of SQL, of databases, I'm sorry, that you can use different commands to search for things and starting how you add records or whatever. So it's having that consistent. MySQL, and both of these are open source compared to the commercial products that you can get. We'll be working with MySQL. It's a fast, multi-threaded, multi-user, and robust SQL database server. It's intended for mission-critical, heavy-loaded production systems, as well as for embedding into mass-deployed software. It is very robust. That's one nice thing about any kind of SQL, especially MySQL. It's very robust. It can be used for mission-critical. This isn't just something flaky that's going to, get you by for a small office, home office. This is quite substantial. To install it to MySQL, we want to run basically the apt-get install, and we're installing the MySQL server.
You want us to do that now?
Go ahead and do that. I'm just going to keep going. If you can keep up, that's fantastic. If not, I'll have the videos available to you, and you can watch as well. Sudo apt, boy, my typing is not doing well. Sudo apt get install MySQL server. There's a lot of administrative tools that you can install as well that work with SQL, MySQL, and you can create users who can access what parts of the database, what they can do with those parts of the databases. So SQL is like a whole infrastructure of itself with users and rights and security and whatever. During the install process, it's going to ask us for basically the root password or admin password of SQL. We're going to keep everything nice and simple. We're going to be just using password as our password for that. But that's why it's asking for it, because you can create additional users and they can only read records or read only certain records, or they can modify parts of records but not others, and so forth. And I'll let this install.
Password for the password again, right?
We're doing password for password. And you do have to repeat it to make sure you type it in correctly. And again, this is for, write it down in your notes, MySQL root user, and then the password is going to be password. And it's installed. Yes. So, if you don't get a password prompt during the install, very odd, but if that happens to you, you can add the password. And page 207, if you'd like to change the MySQL root password, enter the sudo dpkg, the package, reconfigure MySQL server 5.5, and that prompts you for a password. That should give you. You will need a root password though, because we'll be working with systems requiring you to log on to the database, and without the root password, I don't know if it'd be empty or if it would be strange. Okay. Anytime you're making any changes, you can restart MySQL or Apache as well, just like doing the sudo service. And I think that's all we need to change in here. The database engines is perfectly functional and performs well. There are things that you might want to change for processing, just like the Apache server and PHP. There's lots and lots and lots of configuration. They're not done through a control panel. All of them are done through configuration files. So that's what you need to be editing, and they sort of walk you through that. Advanced configuration we're going to skip as well. There's another database that they take you through. It's the Postgre Object Relational Database. It is also SQL based. MySQL is much more popular, and it's almost extensively MySQL we're using it. But they show you another option that you can be installing. Going to chapter 13, LAMP. What does LAMP stand for? Linux plus Apache plus MySQL, and then whatever afterwards. And it's variations of PHP, Perl, or Python, which are all the scripting languages. So it's going to be Linux based, and it's going to have the Apache web server, and it's going to have a MySQL database, and it's going to have then some kind of scripting language behind that, whether it's PHP or Perl or Python. By the way, they also call them AMP servers, so it's independent of what operating system. And they also have WAMP servers for Windows, Apache, MySQL, and PHP and Perl. And they're standalone devices or boxes to do different things. We've essentially installed this already. There was another way that we could install this by using the task select. if I go to if I do sudo task select, now these are combinations of packages. So these aren't individual packages when we did the task select. Remember doing that the first 2-3 weeks or whatever in? These are combinations of them. And we can see that LAMP thinks it's installed because we already have Apache and MySQL and PHP installed. Instead of installing those 3 packages individually, we could have come up to here, just selected this, and it would have installed it. Very interesting note, though, so I'm going to hit escape to exit out of here. And looking at my documentation, it will talk about disadvantages. A disadvantage of using this approach, which is using the task select approach, is that the application files are not placed in the file system in the standard way, which can cause confusion as to where the application is installed. Another larger disadvantage is updating the application. When a new version is released, the same process used to install the application is needed to apply the updates. So we did it manually. We did each product individually. Everything's installed in the default locations and folders and directory structures, so we're good that way. Also, when we do updates, it's just going to do all the package updates as it would package by package. For whatever reason, and I don't fully understand this, by using the task select, by clumping them together, it just installs them differently in different directories. How or why? Not sure. Same thing for updates. You'd have to use task select and using it as a lump sum or as a LAMP update as opposed to Apache update or a MySQL update or a PHP update. So we did it granularly and we're going to keep it that way, but realize that it is a package called LAMP. What things can we do with it? Well, there's Moin. It's a wiki engine. Who's familiar with wikis? Okay, kind of. You've seen them. Where have you seen them? Wikipedia. Here's Wikipedia. Yeah. This is here's the main content. You can features. You can search for different things. If I want to search for Ubuntu, I have different things on here they can choose from, and everything's sort of linked together. It's sort of a web interlinked whatever. Here's your Ubuntu operating system. I have table of contents. Here's the Ubuntu server editions. And kind of the idea behind wikis is that people are able to edit them. So if I see something wrong on here, I can click on edit, and I can change the content of Wikipedia. Now that's the advantage of Wikipedia, but also the skeptical side of Wikipedia is I could change some content on open heart surgery and not have a single clue or idea of what I'm talking about, and it just it's been out there. It can be monitored. You know, people can look at it, change it back right away, and fix it. You can see history of things. You can eventually block people or whatever. So there's lots and lots of control. This wiki, by the way, is not Moin. This is just one of them that's available out to there. Wikipedia is based on an application called MediaWiki. And if I go MediaWiki.org is the free open source software for making wikis, just like Wikipedia. It's written in PHP. It's originally used on Wikipedia, and now also used in several projects, many other wikis that are out there, all kinds of different things. Does Ubuntu has a wiki? Wikipedia. Wiki.ubuntu.com. Here's an example. And it's not doing anything. Let's see. Teams, events. This doesn't look like a regular wiki. Wiki is just a collection of information. Yeah, this is used a little bit differently. I thought they'd be using the Media Wiki as well. Well, that's actually going to be our last activity for today, is to get this installed. Next week, we'll be specifically looking at Media Wiki, of how to use it, of how to add content, of how to manage links, of how to format things, and of how valuable it's going to be. And ultimately using it for your documentation, of being able to take your documentation, putting it in there, sorting it, organizing it, and putting it in a source that is easily accessed and editable. We had a wiki on campus using Media Wiki, tons and tons of information on it. Something happened to it, became corrupt, and we haven't been able to fix it since. And I just haven't had the time to work on it. But tons and tons of information on there, lots of different class information, scripts, whatever. So still trying to figure out what happened there and fixing it. To install, this will take several steps, so please pay close attention. There can be a couple tricky spots in here. The first thing is to install Media Wiki itself. Now what we're installing is the program that allows us to configure and then finish the install. So it's going to take a couple steps, and that's where it gets a little strange, and that's where to be careful. So sudo apt-get, we're going to install Media Wiki and PHP 5 GD. And we'll just sit back and let it do its thing. I took you through briefly some of the directory structures before, and remembering how to navigate and edit files. That's going to be really important in working with this. We're going to need to go to specific directories, edit specific files, move files then, and do those kinds of things. And it's going to be very important that we feel comfortable with navigating and editing. If there's anything in Linux, that's the one thing that you really have to be comfortable with, is navigating and editing documents. I'll just let this continue. It's not too bad to install. It's pretty quick overall, and it put everything in its place that it needed to do. Now we're going to go through the process of configuring it, making sure it creates the right database files in the right places or whatever. So I'm going to follow the documentation. The Apache configuration file is mediawiki.config. It's installed in etc apache 2 config d directory. There's a line in there. It's going to be using a variable called MediaWiki, and it needs to know where that's going to be located. And it's going to ultimately be located under var lib MediaWiki. So that's the directory. This is the reference to that directory. It has a pound sign in front of it, and so that means it's commented out. We need to uncomment that out of this configuration file. So let's work on this together. Let's get to that etc apache 2 config d directory first. So cd space /etc apache 2 conf period d and then /. And if I do an ls at that directory, I should see a mediawiki.config file. I want to edit this file. Now this is a read-only file right now, but if I do a sudo, I can edit it anyways. So sudo mediawiki.conf, vim, sudo vim mediawiki.conf, and this is the file that it is. Okay, we're not going to do a lot of editing on here. All we're doing is taking out one character.
And then
I still need to hit A to append. And I want to arrow down to the third line. And right now it has the pound alias MediaWiki and then points to the actual directory name. I want to delete that pound so that it will run or will execute or will find that document, that directory. Hit escape, :WQ, and write the file and quit. Okay, scrolling down.
And no, I don't.
After you restart the Apache server, you can access the MediaWiki by using the following URL. So the local host is going to be your IP address, and then it's created a subdirectory underneath MediaWiki. Remember MediaWiki? This reference right here, an alias, MediaWiki, is pointing to this directory. So I'm going to be looking for that directory, and then a config, and then an index underneath there. So kind of follow with that path. Yes? You do. You have to restart Apache. So before you can access this, after you restart Apache, you can access it using this link. But I'm just telling you, so when it's looking for this index.php file, it's in the config directory in this directory. So this link, this is an alias, MediaWiki, is an alias to this directory.
What will we deleting in that Vim file?
What you're deleting in that Vim file is the third line down. It had a pound sign in front of alias.
That's what I thought.
Because without that, it would not be able to figure out what MediaWiki is. Because MediaWikis are an alias or a link to a directory. That's the directory it's going to. Does that make sense? Does that any sense at all? Well, we'll go with it anyway. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Let's restart our server. So I do sudo, let's just type it. Sudo service Apache to restart. Now that I restarted my Apache server, it has all the new configuration file. It picked up that new alias, and now when I type in the alias name, I need to change this a little bit so I can see it. I'm using the IP address, so 192.132/media/wiki/config/index.php. So it's going to run a PHP file instead of an HTML file, and it's in the config directory in that var MediaWiki directory. And this is what you should come to. Everybody get to this? If you get to this page, this is a really, really good sign. It's even a better sign if this is green down on the bottom and it says in the environment checked, you can install MediaWiki. Now again, it's just put everything in the right directories. It hasn't configured the rest of the stuff yet. And that's what we need to do next. It's nice because it's all sort of built in, sort of scripted for us, the installation process. We don't have to manually go in and make tables in our MySQL database. We don't have to manually write scripts. We don't have to manually do a lot of stuff. That's one really, really nice about MediaWiki. MediaWiki is something that you should know how to install, configure, and use. This week we're doing installing and configuring. Next week we will concentrate on how to use MediaWiki. It's one of those really important things. Wikipedia is out there, but you should really know how that functions, how you can administer it, how you can look at revision history, how you can, even do the basics. How do you format? How do you do links to pictures? How do you format bullets, numbered lists, documentation of any that kind of sort. So we'll be concentrating next week on that. To configure it for this week, though, down the bottom it's site configuration. What are you going to name it? We'll make ours pretty simple. We'll call it Linux 2 Wiki. on the wiki pages, it says, for problems, please contact, and that's what you would enter here. Whatever you want to be putting in there. We do not have an email system on here yet, so it's not going to make any difference. So just leave it as webmaster at localhost. We're not be contacting anybody anyway. Copyrighted license, no license metadata. This is basically the types of licenses that you are rolling this wiki out as. Is it going to be public domain? Are you saying that there's no licenses? Are you rolling it out under the GNU license 1.2, which is Wikipedia compatible, or some kind of Creative Commons license? We're going to have no license, so there's no licensing. So whatever is put out there is completely unlicensed. It's not even public domain, it's just no license. We need a password for our admin user for our wiki. The admin username is wikisysop for systems operator. You probably want to write that down somewhere because you might need to log in as the admin user for wiki, and you're going to be like, is it admin? Is it root? Is it whatever? By default, it's wikisysop. You can change it. I would not recommend you do that for class so that everybody's the same. So when you turn around and say, oh, what's the password or what's the username, we can all agree with it. If you want to put your name in there, that's completely fine. And if you want to change it to root or admin, that's completely fine as well. Again, just for consistency in class, I'd probably recommend keeping it as the default. The password will be password, if you so choose. I'm not making you do anything. If you want to make it Marco and some long extensive password, that is completely fine. If you ask for my help and you can't get into your wiki, I'll say reinstall. There's no backdoors that I know of. I'm sure there are. I don't know any. Okay. Object caching, we're not going to do any caching, or we're dealing with caching servers. That's more complicated than we need to get into. Email notification, and authentication setup. These are actually pretty cool features. Again, we don't have an email server set up yet, and so we're not going to be using these. You can use this for password reminders for people. Hey, I forgot my password. Oh, let me email it to you. If you had this as an option, it could be there. User-to-user email. As people edit the documents, or as you new users out there, you can say, hey, what were you thinking when you edited this? So we're going to disable user-to-user email. You can also be told, just like if I went to the open heart surgery page and made changes to it, people who are really involved with that might want to be notified when changes happen. This is where this happens. When changes happen, you'll get notified for email. Again, no email, so we're going to disable that. Email address authentication, we're just disabling everything email related. Under database configuration, it only sees the one type. It does support the other one. So if that was installed, you could choose between MySQL and the other one. I only have one installed, so it doesn't give me any other options. The database host, if your database is on a different server, you have to point to it. Sometimes your SQL server could be on one server, and your PHP and your web services could be on another server, so you have to point to it. They're all on one same box right now, so it's just pointing to itself. So localhost is where my MySQL is. Here's another items that you might want to document for your resources. We shouldn't have to go into the database directly, but again, if it asks you for a database username and password, these would be important. The name of the database itself, you can change this. You can change this to Linux 2 Wiki if you want, or my favorite, or my first database, or whatever. But WikiDB is the default, and the database username is WikiUser. This is for the database, not MySQL. So it's going to create a user in MySQL called WikiUser, and it's going to create it with the password that you enter here, which I would recommend as password. Then we scroll down to, that's how the wiki is going to be using it, but there's still super user access account. Well, we don't have a root on Ubuntu. We only have super user, so that's where sudo comes in. So we're going to use the super user account. And again, we're going to use the same. We need to know what the super user's account password is, and it is password. That's why it's nice keeping them all together and all the same as password. So again, the database name is WikiDB, the database username is WikiUser, and the database password for WikiUser will be password. We have a super user account, its password is password as well. Specific options are down here. We're not going to change anything. If you are using MySQL for lots of different things, you would probably want to be making the tables inside of there something meaningful. And they even suggest something like beginning prefixes, table prefixes with an MW. So MediaWiki table 1, MediaWiki table 2, as opposed to everything being mix and match. You can mix them and match them all that you want. It's sort of like taking virtual machines and putting them all in the same directory. It will work flawlessly. It'll know what's going on. If you're trying to look at the files, though, it gets a little complicated, a little weird. So we're only be using MediaWiki, so we don't have to worry about putting prefixes on them. And then we keep all the other defaults. And now it's going to say install MediaWiki. This is going to create those tables. It's going to create those users. It's going to create all the environment that it needs to do.
We didn't have a table prefix, did we?
No, no table prefix. It's not going to hurt if you do because you'll never even see it. Give it a minute. Let it do its little circling in the upper right hand corner. When it's done and you scroll down, you should see installation successful.
That's what I see.
Now it's going to have you move that local, the file, by the way, that all those things that you just did, it wrote a file out called localsettings.php. Among other things, it actually did database configuration and user creation and that kind of stuff, but it set up all those settings in localsettings.php. Now we want to move those settings to this directory, Etsy MediaWiki. The documentation tells you the exact command to do that. It's on page 217. Sudo mv for move. And now this is where typing and spelling matters. It's the var lib MediaWiki. Config space Etsy MediaWiki. So it's going to move it from the var lib MediaWiki config directory to the Etsy MediaWiki directory.
Keep the capital letters?
Yes. File names, caps do matter. Okay, now the moment of truth. If you go back to your desktop, it says move the file from this directory to this directory, then follow this link to your wiki. You click on this link and you should come to your main page. The MediaWiki has been successfully installed. This would be a link that you probably want to keep track of because we'll be coming back this next week. You can bookmark it, save it, whatever you want to do. Yeah, this is the full name. If it has the index.php, which is the script that's running because we're doing PHP scripting, and this is the main page. If you ended up just typing in, your IP address or your server's name and then MediaWiki, just like it automatically found index.html, it's automatically going to find index.php and then run it. So that's really all that you have to remember is your IP address and then MediaWiki. You could ultimately change that to your main page. If that's all that's on your web server, you could either go to your Apache web server and say, I want that directory and that file to be my root, my home file. Or you could shift all the files down a directory into that var www directory. And that's just the document root anyway, and that's where we'll find all those documents. Most times in a web server, you're going to have multiple pages. And so it's going to be used for multiple things. So we're doing an extra activity just for fun?
I never want to do
Sure, why not? Even if you don't want to.
Sounds wonderful.
Okay, let's go to our server. And we'll go to our, var www directory. cd var www. This is our root of our server, of our main server web page, correct?
Yes.
And we have our index file in there. If I do an ls, I have my index.html, and then I have a php info.php, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Let's edit that index file. So sudo vim index.html.
I already did edit it.
And then hit A for append.
All right.
And I'm going to put Paul Benfield back to regular P instead of H1. Then I'm going to add another line. I'm going to try this. It's a bracket and then an A, href equals, and then in parentheses, I'm going to type in http : / my IP address 192.168.230.132 / MediaWiki. That's really hard to see, isn't it, I suppose? 192.168.230.132 / MediaWiki. And put an end quote on there. Close caret. And then Linux to wiki. And then a /A. HTML codes has been a while since I've used them. We'll try this. It's one of those things, if you don't use them, you have to look them up and refresh. So we're going to try this. Anybody good at HTML codes? Does this look okay? Kind of? Any of your suggestions?
For mine, I just did the path of the thing. I didn't do HTTP with the IP address. I did
Just in MediaWiki?
root MediaWiki / index.php / main page. That works.
Okay. If we do that, I bet you won't even need that. I bet you just MediaWiki would be fine. Let's try it that way. We'll try it both ways.
Well, what are we supposed to get? Because if I click on that,
I'm going to write that.
it says Linux to wiki and it takes me to the main page, just the way you typed it.
Okay. And if I go to my main page, I have this is my default web server, this web software, blah, 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 Paul Benfield, Linux to wiki. I should click on that, and then it takes me to my Linux to wiki. And it says Linux to wiki. So now you have a reference, and there's multiple ways of doing it. You could do the full path, you could just use the reference of MediaWiki, or type the whole thing out, HTTP, whatever the IP address. I like just the path. The path is probably easier, but then you have to worry about the IP address or whatever. So now you made another web. Now you can put on your resume that you're HTML and PHP developers.
Wow, that's amazing.
And MediaWiki. No, actually, we're going to do that next week.
Is that it?
Excellent question about homework. Are we waiting a bit? But you had some activities last week, and this week especially. I'll be putting together some drop boxes again. I'm not going to do them right away. I want you to like kind of review them and test a little bit later on, as opposed to just like, okay, I just did them. So it's going to refresh or review. Sort of like what we did last week or the week before. Sort of like what we reviewed so far. So probably next week I might have you do some of this stuff to review and do the snapshots. Does there any questions or problems with the screenshot things? I looked at several of them. I didn't grade them yet, but I did look at several of them. I was able to view them, and they looked fine and short and concise for most of them. Some of them got a little long, but most of them are very, very short and concise. Any questions or problems on those?
Doing sound?
Sound hasn't been necessary so far because they've been very precise. Like, I want you to do this, I want you to log on, I want to see you install this package. So I haven't seen a need for voice yet. And that probably makes the file smaller without voice. But so yeah, hold off on voice for right now. Not that I don't want to hear you.
Whatever.
It's just, may not be necessary.
A bit of a different question, actually.
Yes. You will have pretty much all the time to review those and finish those. There isn't a real deadline. I'll let you know as we get close to the end of the semester. Probably within the last, I don't want everybody turning everything in the last day by any means. But let me take a look at what that would be. Okay, there's a question about the remote administration Dropbox. It says configure OpenSSH on the server and on the desktop. All you're doing is that quick apt get install OpenSSH server and then client. There isn't much of a configuration to do that. What I'm really testing, or I'm not testing, that's a bad word. What I'm really observing on this lab, and let me bring this over here in fact. What I'm observing on this lab is this part, is that it is functional.
Okay.
So you're not doing anything. You are, you're looking at the server's IP address. You're installing the nmap package, which you've done a million times by now, and then you're removing the nmap package. So nothing really serious is going on. You're just showing that from your client you can connect your server. This couldn't happen if you didn't do this. So I'm not having you, show real detail of what you're doing and how you're doing it. It's just do this, and then I know that's working. Does that answer your question?
That's great.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And as you have other questions that like, what are you even asking? Please ask, and I'll clarify. I don't intentionally make them difficult or, trying to trick you. Sometimes just how I word things, they're trickier than I intend them to be. Going back to your wiki, let's find my wiki here on my desktop. Here it talks about MediaWiki has been installed. Consult the user's guide for information on using the wiki software. If you click on the user's guide, it actually takes you to mediawiki.org, which is the site that we looked at before, and it shows you different links. Here's a handbook part for the readers, for editors, moderators, system administrators, and developers. You can see what you're doing for reading, how do I work with reading, tracking changes, looking at different accounts, editing, start new pages, advanced editing, and so forth. I'd probably, if you have some time this week, I'd be looking at this section. Especially with new pages, renaming or moving pages, just basic things. And I'll be going through those next week as well. But if you have some heads up of where we're going, text formatting, under formatting here, wiki text samples. And they show you all the coding to do this. This is all text as well. It's all straight ASCII sets, so there is no bold, there's no italic size, there's no numbering or bullets. All that's done through different coding of how you do that. It's kind of like HTML in the fact that you have codes to do things. It's just MediaWiki has its own. MediaWiki being so prevalent and wikis being so prevalent, you really should have a good understanding of what some of those codes are. Even if it's like HTML, you've done it, you kind of forgot it, at least you've known it and you kind of know where to look and how to reference those things. Same thing with MediaWiki. So kind of look through some of the MediaWiki information. We will be going through this next week though. Questions? Comments? Okay, that's all I have for you this week. If you do think of anything during the week, please give me a call, let me know. Otherwise, we'll be working on MediaWiki configuration, paging, linking, all that kind of stuff next week. Have a good week.